I'd like to thank you, Michael, for coming in to do this.
That's okay.
It's great to see Michael. I haven't seen Michael for a little bit.
Well, we can't remember. We may have seen each other quite often,
exactly.
but we can't remember.
In circumstances that shall remain unknown, I'm sure. But it would be just a 40-minute talk where we are going to go through some of Michael's previous works, bringing us up to date, and I'm really pleased that you're here, Michael. It's great. I have known you for some years, so if I slip into sort of language that anyone can ask immediately, what do you mean by that? But I wanted to start, if I may, with this first image, which is of a work which is one of your earliest works that I'm familiar with, which would have been produced at the time that you were at Goldsmiths, and would have been a moment when you were working with fabrics, and in this case, I believe, a car cover.
There were car covers, yeah.
Tell us about these works.
In the context of the college, I was kind of interested in working quickly, basically, and it kind of that's just I don't really know what to say about it, to be honest. You've got flummoxed me with that. I thought I'd hidden that away, and
there's more.
And it's upside down actually, but yeah. So no, these were at my degree show. I showed that piece at Carsten Schubert's, and they're kind of they're not rigorous in a sense, I guess, as the work that comes immediately after this, which I kind of feel more comfortable about talking, is much more kind of the methodology behind it is much more rigorous in a sense, as this is much more about kind of mark making, really, I guess, but in a very immediate way. Because at that point of time at college, I wasn't really interested in with my nose to the grindstone. I was kind of interested in making, because they were kind of more like action-based in a sense. They were very, like something like that would probably make like half an hour, 2 hours. So I was much more interested in working in a very quick way.
And this again is a car cover, or it's a
piece
piece
it's a car cover. Yeah, it's my first group show I had at Carsten Schubert's in 1988. Yeah, 88. Yeah.
And so your aim was to make a sculpture, a wall-based work, within a limited period of time, having just got this.
Yeah, it was just very immediate. So they were kind of like greengrocer clips, so which you can't see, but they're pulling at the material, and it's very taut in places, but then it kind of drapes. So they're very kind of formal things.
I think there's. I still think they're very, very beautiful works, and there's something about them which is interesting in the sense that much of Goldsmiths at that time would have been looking at, say, minimalism and conceptual works, and one thinks of Robert Morris maybe in relation to pieces like this. Yeah. But what the other artist was doing was more flat representational. You were engaged in a kind of form of soft sculpture.
Yeah, they're kind of soft sculpture. I mean, at that point of time, I mean, it was painting, basically figurative painting. I remember the years above me at art college, there was lots of like trans avant-garde kind of new spirit painting was still kind of, it's still about. So there's lots of kind of very figurative painting really, and then we came along. I mean, I call us we, but we're not,
a group of you.
A group of us, yeah.
It's for me fascinating. It's a period I remember well myself.
You were down the road.
I was down the road in Camberwell Art School, but it was this absolute hinge between a form of received expressionism, which was very popular in the art schools at this time, be it German painters, Kiefer, Baslitz, be it the Americans like Schnabel, who himself was ripping off polka, and then you had also the trans avant-garde in Italy.
Yeah.
So everything was thick paint and mysterious, and everyone was.
No, I remember buying Flash Art and thinking, oh, I'd like to be in this magazine one day. There was something glossy about it, and just kind of sumptuous about it. That was just I found bit, I should have kept that quiet, but very attractive.
But I think
at the time.
I think the design of certain magazines can't be underestimated. I mean, for instance, when Freeze came out, it stood out a mile compared to other magazines because the design was immaculate. Then Tony Arifin, later Tom Gidley, but it seemed to me that I think anyone in their right mind would want to be in those magazines at the time.
Well, I wasn't really in my right mind, but it's, I mean, these kind of works, I went on to show them at Freeze as well, so
but
so it's kind of, it was like kind of hangover from my degree show, and then they kind of moved on to a much bigger scale at Freeze.
And in that sense, there's also a body of work which shows the clips. And these are now not car covers. They are the type of tarpaulin covering that also one associates with those sort of washing bags and so on. Tell what is this exactly?
But yeah, it's a greengrocer's tarpaulin basically, and I've just kind of, it's been kind of scrunched up as much as I possibly could. It's on the wall. And I mean, this is about the same time. Sorry, you've really flummoxed me with these. So, my ability to articulate what they are is I'm struggling.
Shall I have a stab at it? I think in a way,
one of us should.
I think from my point of view, at least, and we will come into the known territory. I sort of slotted these slides in ahead of Michael seeing them, but one thing is that it leads us into.
Actually, this isn't my work.
It
is. I didn't recognise it.
It's in your book.
No.
But it is this does in many ways. This group
You've
of
made
works
this nice stuff, but anyway, carry on.
lead into Market.
Yeah.
And Market was the most extraordinary installation. And I mean, can you describe it to us?
They're kind of like 100 different individual kind of artworks, all taken. I mean, I had market stall makers make these markets, so they're like things. I was interested in the outside world basically, and the way how things are constructed in the outside world. So there are market stalls, there are small podiums that are kind of Allied Bakery baking trays. And it probably took me about a year to kind of to construct the whole piece. We had to have a caveat in the because they're Allied Bakeries crates. We had to tell them that we wouldn't appropriate them, as we wouldn't hand them back because these crates are appropriate the whole time. So there are people driving around in vans prosecuting people for appropriating their crates. So we said they would always remain artworks. They would never go back to their former use. So we had to sign something to say that. So it's on the same scale. It's Building 1. It's an old Nabrisco factory in South London, and it's on the same scale as a real-life market. Apart from the only things on display is the actual display itself. It's just the apparatus of display. And I liked the idea at the time of crates just stacking on top of crates. That the market stalls, you can just literally take them apart. So you could literally take it apart like a market. So I liked the idea of it being fluid in that sense. So it's kind of a fluid material, and the sense that nothing was fixed. That it's, like everything was on a very human scale, and it's just kind of like red oxide finish. And so it's very much what one would see in a real life market. And then I had 3 videos called appropriation videos, and just people. There's Mr. Cruzon still going, actually, he's on Camberwell Green, and just constructing these small podiums in very early in the morning. And
I just want to stay on this particular show for a little while. Forgive me, because it is, at least for me, as someone who saw it, one of the most memorable exhibitions I've ever seen. And I remember going one night to this huge old former biscuit factory down in Bermondsey, and it was an amazing experience, let alone the fact that half of this space, another half of this space, was in total darkness. If I recall, there was a table in the middle of a rec room next door, which is where the bar was, and you had to walk through rubble to get to this place. And then you came back to this space,
that's right, yeah.
which was somehow pristine within its layout. And one thing that was very, very clear was that this was the language of the South London streets at that time, especially South East London. I felt that many of these shops, which had become subject even prior to recession to being left abandoned, and I remember certainly being an art student at that time, you could rip off the hoardings, the old canvas rain covers that could be cranked out for old fruit and vegetable shops and things like that. And there was this sense of decay about the place, and that was a part of an era that was sort of slightly at the edge of something.
Yeah, I mean, there were lots of abandoned buildings. You know, it was one formerly, like where we did freeze, the PLA building was once, you know, Surrey Docks, then got called Surrey Quays. So there was a kind of, you know, the spaces were being taken over, were being transformed into luxury flats.
And in a sense, there's this transformative thing going on in your work, where very basic objects and elements, car covers, tarpaulins, suddenly became almost Donald Judd-esque art.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of mimics minimalism, but I guess that's kind of part of where my interest in the everyday comes in, really, and the everyday and value, and like a multi-useful crate, how, in a sense, a crate becomes invisible. You no longer see it anymore. And, yeah.
Looking back at this show in particular, what do you think of these works?
I kind of feel as if I could have carried on, in a sense. It's like, I guess, out of all my contemporaries, the beginning was the scale of it, I guess. It's like, you know, before we really kind of started to really articulate what we were as artists, it's like, it was just the sheer scale of the whole thing, and people were really flummoxed about it, in a sense, because everywhere you looked in the space, it looked like what you just left. So so there wasn't everything was really treated the same. And I think I'm still kind of follow that kind of mantra to a point to this day, really, that I try and treat everything the same. So the crates are just literally just stacked on top of each other, because that's what they were designed to do. So it was just, I guess it's just very ordinary, and that's what, and I like the idea that, as Kate Bush says in the essay, it's about, it's like a homage to people, like real people who exchange goods between each other on a day-to-day level, rather than a kind of sightless global market.
And in this instance, around that particular installation were videos of the store owners setting up, as they do every morning at an early hour. Yeah. And it was intriguing, because while you had this sort of reference to conceptualist sculpture of the 60s and 70s, you also had just that reference to basic shopkeeping Britain.
Yeah.
I mean, at that point, I just wanted to ask, what did they make of you filming them doing this?
I can't remember how much we explained about that, but it was just a fixed camera, and we just recorded what they do every day of the week. So
in the show, is it the sense that they're artists, or that
no, it's just kind of mimicking. I guess because that's what I'm kind of doing in the Building One space. I'm kind of mimicking what's going on outside, and obviously with the videos and everything, they kind of bring outside noises into the space.
Can you just talk a little bit about how the show was received? What happened to you as an artist at that point?
Well, nothing really. That was I remember, actually, I wasn't just the artist, I was a janitor as well, so I used to clean the space every day, because it would intermittently rain into the space, and you'd have to, and it's very cold in there, so the plywood would warp, and pigeons would poo on it as well, so it all needed to be replenished. So you kind of, that's what you kind of do as an artist. You spend your time maintaining things as well. Yeah. So what did it? I can't honestly recollect. I don't think it really.
Was
this is in 1990.
As a work that could be purchased or not? How did that go?
Well, it didn't, and in the end, now I'm starting to recollect. I left my gallery, and it basically got skipped, most of it. Yeah. So because basically I couldn't afford the storage of it, so most of it was destroyed.
And also, I saw a version of it at Palais de
Yeah, we
Tokyo.
remade it.
Fairly recently, 3
fairly
years
recently,
ago.
Palais
yeah.
to Tokyo.
Tokyo.
Yeah, in 2010.
And how did you go about that?
Well, it also, in the meantime, destroyed all the records of it as well, and so it was quite difficult to recollect. I mean, we published a catalogue at the time, so I kind of just referenced the catalogue, and it was a mass, basically, and I liked the way it's a market, and a market I liked because it was the scale of a real-life market, and people could meander through it.
Yeah. I think that was one of the key things about it, which it doesn't come across in the images, is it was as much a
very
static.
physical.
It was a very physical, static work, but also a social piece, because you found yourself sort of promenading up these aisles, and while it was street architecture, you also felt like you were in streets, and it must have been interesting for you constantly doing Pac-Man all day to maybe get from A to B. But it did have this phenomenal presence in the room. It reminded me, among other things, Kippenberger's Kafka installation, beautiful piece with chairs and so on. But it was, at the time, I think, a landmark show, certainly of our generation, your generation. And I think that one thing before we leave it was that Michael Craig Martin once said to me that, in terms of that generation of a time, he said once that he had tried to, within the remit of what is possible as the lecturing department or teaching department at Goldsmiths, to recreate that energy associated with that year, and had never succeeded to repeat it.
Yeah, I remember Michael saying very similar kind of thing about he was waiting for people like us to come along, and then once we'd left, he was waiting to replicate that, but it didn't quite happen.
Was it just an extraordinary mix of characters, or was it about the social circumstances from where these people were?
It's the whole thing, I guess. I don't quite know. I mean, Damien kind of been a bit of a ragamuffin, and then us not really treating him that seriously about first of all getting the space, getting the money to do the space up, getting money for a catalogue, getting money to fabricate the work. I mean, all of those things really. So I mean, that's kind of a very phenomenal thing to do. Someone who's in the second year at art college.
And that's with reference to Frieze, which is also said to have sort of rather divided the school a bit, because it was almost about those people who were in and those people who were anti-Frieze.
Yeah. Well, I'd left by that time, so I mean, it's art school, isn't it? So
Also, just ever so briefly on Building 1, it was a moment in which sort of careers were decided on some level. For instance, Damien, who was at the beginning a curator artist associated with that space, i.e. that it was an extension of what his activities from Frieze, had now decided, or would decide, to be an artist, and pulled out of the Building 1 curatorial side, leaving it to just two individuals.
Yeah, at some point, and then it was up Carl Friedman and
Billy
Selman. So I guess even at that point, even at a juncture, it's still kind of people representing themselves and feeling that we could make art, sell the art, and build the environment for our art, all encompassing really. But that obviously dissipated.
It's worth, if you don't mind, Michael, just explaining the sort of place London was in the early 90s at this point.
Well, I mean, it's very. I mean, I joined Carlson Schubert Limited, which is normally what that would say, apart from it says closing down sale banner over the top of that. It's a shop, but in 1988, and at that point, you kind of felt as if you had to serve your apprenticeship to a degree before one would be given a show, because there was a very small art scene in this country for young artists, and that's part of the reason, obviously, what instigated Damien to put on shows at Frieze and Building 1, and I joined Carlson Schubert's, and then and at that point I remember Cologne was the kind of place where Cologne Art Fair was a very big place to go, basically. Very small, it's very small art scene, but it was the place, the art fair, and I've been blown away by the idea that suddenly, it's an art fair, and I didn't really dawn on me there's all these artists from all around the world making art, and suddenly you're it's the market. It's a kind of naked kind of, it's not the best environment to view art. So I was kind of bowled over by that, and I think by this time, I can't remember. And basically, 1988, it was still very affluent. Also, being an art student, you're kind of in your own bubble. You don't realise. And then by 1991, 92, there was quite a very deep recession. And so half of London looked like this.
It does. it did, and it does
Yeah.
feel at the moment that the recession that we are in feels a bit phony or virtual. It's a banking crisis, whereas here there was physical manifestations everywhere,
Yeah.
and it felt like the high street was closing.
It was, yeah. It felt at that juncture that so this was like a very kind of normal kind of street kind of furniture one would see, and so I kind of like to think of it as this is what the end of the world would look like. So some sort of day glow fluorescent nightmare, and it's everything must go, that kind of it's just basically I collected all these shopping trolleys and filled them with junk that people had thrown out, and I had all these kind of sales slogans, and I completely customized both floors of the gallery. And so the shop workers who work, because it's in Charlotte Street, just off Tottenham Court Road, will walk past and say, "Oh, what a shame, the gallery's shut down." Because they used to actually amuse them looking in the window to see what things contemporary artists would come up with. So so people would always feel how, So it was, and I was kind of talking to people on a tape cassette recorder, so it would kind of like everything must go, everything's been reduced.
There was that's absolutely.
Yeah.
There was in Oxford Street. Fairly known stores were closing and being hijacked by some likely lads who would be constantly rabbiting, as Michael and I were joking earlier, on these types of microphones, and you actually recreated that in a recording. So when you walked into the space, it was that language. Everything's on.
Yeah,
sale. Everything
must go. Everything. A lady came up to me a moment ago. She said to me, "Young man, how can you sell it so cheap?" I said, "It's very simple. You see, I said it's a massive sale. It's a monster sale. It's £100,000 clearance sale. Will be not repeated and won't be seen again. Crazy, 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 crazy. Don't be shy, because I was shy when I was a little girl." So,
but I mean, it was also again an exhibition which combines these languages of the everyday, which at this point is in a period of extreme flux, as it were, but also just that sense of you're getting a lot of ideas from just the ordinary, everything around you.
Yeah, and it's all, piss-stained mattresses, teddy bears have lost their eyes, people thrown out. And I liked the way, I never sold anything, it wasn't a very successful sale, but people would rummage around in the trolleys trying to find a bargain. And so I liked all that part of it. But just like this, constantly me talking to people just drove the gallery staff insane. I think they used to secretly switch off the tapes when I left.
I think Scrappy Services, for me at least, had a sense of this combination of ordinary everyday language and transformation of ordinary objects. And this was suddenly really, I remember this was a very sophisticated project at the time. Tell us about it.
I don't know where to go. But, by this time I'd left Carsten Schubert, and they tried to retrain me doing something else, the government, that is, and I refused to do that. So then I came upon the idea of employing myself to build my fictitious cleaning company that get rid of people who no longer played a useful role in life. And it was it's like a fictitious, bogus cleaning company.
It had that
called Scrappy Services.
I mean, it had that slight shift from observations about objects every day to a commentary, perhaps, on life, on the way people are treated.
Yeah, it's very difficult for me to look at. I can't. Yeah, I like to pretend this wasn't my work, but it is. I was very obsessed at this point in time. I made thousands of little figures out of rubbish. I used to collect like rubbish every day. I would go and raid tin stores at Sainsbury's for lager cans and soft drinks cans. I mean, collecting. I used to go and raid McDonald's late at night in Peckham. I used to,
Every single figure is cut from a can or that's been, and it was extraordinary again walking into this. This is Chisenhall, very large space, and I just remember thinking at the time, because I heard you were collecting all of this stuff, and it was just everywhere, and it just seemed to
I made
represent
thousands of
days
figures,
and days.
and I handmade every one, and it became just part of my everyday routine.
Well, if I may, and don't answer if you, but you know, when you say I wish it weren't my work, what do you mean?
Well, it was just a labour of love.
Yeah, yeah,
That's what it was.
Yeah.
And it was a real labour of. At that point in time, I wasn't showing any work anywhere.
yeah.
Booby, booby, boo. And I just. Partly, I just got obsessed with this particular piece of work, basically, and it took 3 or 4 years of my life
To complete.
Yeah, to complete it all. And I finally got to show it in all places, Minneapolis, in a group exhibition called Brilliant.
Yeah.
And then we, I was basically working by myself, and Judy Adam helped me kind of liaise the whole thing. And but it was at the time I was very serious about it, and the idea that these, setting the state of kind of people losing their jobs, and I was very serious about it. So
it reflected a widespread desperation.
Yeah, me personally,
Yeah.
I felt like on the scrap heap as well.
Yeah.
So
Along with millions
of other people
who were being laid off.
Yeah.
As a
So
result
it was that
of
kind of
recession.
sense of human loss and loss of potential, basically. And people were literally just dumped. That's how I felt at the time.
The drawings that came out of it are fascinating, highly detailed.
Yeah, they're kind of more like diaristic kind of.
I mean, it seemed to, at some level, you had met, if I'm correct, with contractors and people who were working in disposal industry. So you actually had a kind of business plan here. It felt like at times.
Kind of, but I think it's like the first time I hadn't really drawn at college at Goldsmiths. I hadn't, so it was kind of it's like the first time I really picked up a pen for many years. So. And they're kind of like very diaristic because the work had taken so long. I kind of wanted to document that in a different kind of way.
Not afraid of small projects. At this point in '98, you were beginning to. That was the return of the crates. I remember walking into this space and seeing the drawings.
Yeah,
it
it's
was
like. So it's a kind of play on Allied Bakeries crates, sole property. I can't remember exactly how it went, but it says the sole property of Michael Landy, who will prosecute for the retention
this
or
was
unauthorised
your
use
own,
of this crate.
your own designed crate.
Yeah.
A big day.
They forgot the D in unauthorised the first time round, so I had to get 2,000 made again. So I got them up like 10 flights of stairs, and then one day I was having a cup of tea, and I read the text, and I thought, where's the... And then suddenly it dawned on me, of course, it wouldn't just be on one crate, it'd be on all 2,000. So they had to get shredded and start all over again. But basically, this is very much in the spirit of when I first left art college and kind of doing things for ourselves. So, I sent out an invitation to invite people to come and see the exhibition. It was where I used to live in Fashion Street, just off Brick Lane. And it basically was a proposal to destroy all my worldly belongings, and I was trying to find someone who would facilitate that. Because by that time I'd sold Scrappy Services to the Tate. I had some money for the first time. I remember I was by myself, living by myself. I remember just at the kitchen table with a blank piece of paper, and then the thought popped into my head, I've got a car, I've got a suit, what does that all mean? And then I thought, I'm going to destroy my worldly belongings. And then I thought about and basically all the drawings are to do with how one could go about that. And I constructed the crates for walls to exhibit the drawings.
I mean, you must have at this point, while having the idea and thinking, this is a good idea, I must pursue it, you must have thought, this is kind of a...
Well, it was an idea that it was in and out, and then for various reasons, and that went on for quite a long, about 2.5 years, 3 years.
I mean, the commitment element of what would eventually happen is phenomenal. But here we see a proposal for it, really.
Yeah, that's still kind of like very much like a tableau, like Scrappy Services was. So when I started to speak to James Lingwood from our Angel, commissions artists to make public artworks, and then through a dialogue, which I wasn't really used to having a dialogue with people over my work. I mean, this is my property. keep off, and then suddenly we're having an exchange about my practice with James, and I found it a bit like, whoa, what's going on here? These are barriers, but anyway, but actually I found it ultimately very beneficial for me. Then we worked out that it would be better as a sort of as a performance thing, as a performance kind of piece, rather than as a kind of tableau, which was very. But obviously, not. I was very articulate performance and what that kind of entailed.
How were those negotiations with Art Angel? It could be anyone, but an agency which is setting about to rid you of all your possessions. I'd like to see the contract on that one.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's a contract. But yeah, so I don't think.
Extraordinary.
But that was, that it began with actually just cataloguing all my worldly possessions. That's how we began. And my friend Clive Lisserman from Goldsmiths, we were at the same year together. He actually catalogued all my worldly belongings, bit by bit by bit. So that's kind of how we started, really. And then we looked at various ways how we could do that, basically.
I mean, there's the obsessive nature of what you do, the completist in you.
Yeah, because I kind of found all the tools to dismantle it was literally I designed the conveyor belt and the way it was more like a scaletric set. So it would take one object.
Could we play the DVD, please?
To go round.
And we can play that while we're talking. But it did, as Michael's explaining, it led to the most extraordinary project on Oxford Street, Breakdown. And I remember tuning into the Channel 4 News one day, and there it was. And
that's Heather.
That's Heather.
Yeah, so what happened was that, maybe we could turn this down, yeah. But because I wanted it to be on a busy shopping thoroughfare, basically, and obviously Oxford Street is the most busiest shopping thoroughfare we've got, and my production manager, Tracy Ferguson, she read that CNAs were moving out of Britain, and so we managed to persuade them. James is kind of, I don't know how much he told them about the whole project, but we managed to secure the building for about 4 weeks. So it's Primark now, at the top end of near Marble Arch, and so it's the most extraordinary project to do, to obviously destroy all your worldly belongings in front of complete strangers.
There's no doubt that you did, and I remember seeing you not long after it had just finished, and I said, "What have you got left?" And you said, "Well, just this jacket. I've found this coat, and you were left with what you were standing in."
Yeah, at that point, yeah. I hadn't really thought about the aftermath. I just thought about the 2 weeks of the actual, because that was my artwork in a sense. It'd taken me 2.5 years to get to that point, so I was there to enjoy my artwork.
If we could just go back to the slides, that would be great.
So yeah, we used to play my record collection on my BMW speakers every day, and it kind of acted a kind of very jovial kind of workaday kind of fashion. So
I mean, your car went through it. You have a
I had my car valeted, and I had the bump knocked out of it, so it could look its best before we destroyed it. So you couldn't really make this up, could you?
No. There must have been, and you must get asked this, there must have been moments where you just thought, no, I can't let that
No, I
go
never
to.
thought that. Most things that we did have some things stolen, most things were stolen at the private view, so that says a lot about the art world. And because I guess people thought it was very funny to steal things that I was going to get rid of, and they're kind of like souvenirs, I suppose.
I mean, there
was literally everything. So you were dealing with paintings, you were dealing with VCRs, you're dealing with cars, you're dealing with love letters, you're dealing with books, you're dealing with bits of molded plastic that fallen off the VCR, and you can't quite remember what it was, but you had to get everything was catalogued and given a name and a serial number, and that's Gary Hume's clown painting. Gary actually, he heard I was going to destroy my worldly belongings, and then he decided that he wanted his clown painting back that he'd given me for my birthday present, and then he felt bad. He told me this in retrospect. Then he felt bad when he came to see the exhibition, because he actually thought it was very generous, this spirited exhibition, And so he gave me the original painting back
So
to destroy.
So it's brilliant.
So but it's the only time I actually thought of anything about value was when I'd got my burner on it, on my the burner, and I was scraping the paint off the gloss paint off, and I suddenly thought, what are you doing? But anyway, that was...
Because there was that last stage, or part of the process was you breaking it up, breaking it down
everything got
to go
broken
through
down
the shredder.
into its material parts. So you're kind of literally taking things back to where they originally came from, and then everything was kind of shredded and granulated.
I like this. I was just talking to one of my colleagues, the idea of Scrappy Services being scrapped as part of breakdown. But it's it was an extraordinary project, Michael. Just talking about it again now, what thoughts come to mind?
I don't know. I mean, it's very difficult because when I'm wrapped up in a project, I'm like kind of completely focused. But then I try to unfocus, and I could then try and move. So it's like an abstract in a sense. Yeah. It becomes an abstract because it's a kind of good, and it becomes. It's not anything around my neck. It's not a weight around my neck, but it becomes like something you can play with in a sense. And I quite like that because it was 10 years ago. Yeah. And
did you feel relieved? Did you feel a sense of I don't own anything anymore? This is great.
I found a liberation for a while. Actually, I really enjoyed the 2 weeks. If you can, destroy your worldly belongings in front of complete strangers, enjoyable. But I found it. I found it very liberating, actually. I talked a lot. I mean, you weren't just dealing with it. People. What I really liked about it is people really wanted to talk about it. People who came in the doors at CNAs. It's not an art gallery. People come in and they literally wanted to talk about what was going on. I thought I was going to get really... The most thing I came away with, I actually think the British public were all right, actually. Yeah. On the whole, because, obviously my mum and dad spent their whole life working to have things, to possess things, and then there was this guy, in Oxford Street, kind of obliterating everything that people work hard to possess, in a sense. And I understand at the same time that possession is a very human character. We all possess things. It's a very... You can't not possess things. You can't help but consume things. Things come through the letterbox every day. You can't... Things stick to you living in a Western society. You just, And so I talked a lot about... So I wasn't just talking to the members of the party, I was talking to the press. So then you had to kind of try and mediate what you were trying to say to... Because I was doing like 8 or 9 press interviews a day as well. So I became the spokesperson for my exhibition as well. I wasn't just the artist. You become a spokesperson. You stand for it as well. And, you become very good at talking to the... Well, I thought I was good. Maybe I was rubbish. But anyways, so it was interesting. So I would talk about consumerism a lot, basically. I would talk about the consumerism and about, commodities and ideology made material, those kind of things.
I was somehow just in the middle of that reminded about Tracy and Sarah's shop. Tracy and Sarah Lucas having a shop and making stuff out of junk and selling it there and then. But again, that element of social interaction being a key thing and meeting the public was a big part of that project. Yeah, it was. And even at Michael Landy at home was kind of similar. I was performing, in a sense. I was making this collage, I remember, as people came in to see the exhibition. But I would, I would talk to people as well. And you just had to be very open. I think that was, when you destroy your worldly belongings, you just got to be very open about it. You can't hide. You've got to be just very open with people, and that's the kind of way. It was kind of performing as well. It's a different kind of performance. I tried to hide quite a lot up on my material, on my gantry, but I found it really interesting. People talking about, because the best way it worked is like, this object would take 10 minutes to go around the whole conveyor. And people would literally look at things, and suddenly they'd make a mental inventory of how much they possessed and their own feelings about possession. And I think that's how it pulled people in. SemiDetached 2004 is a project that came up. Oh, I asked to put... Did I ask that? Oh, yeah. I was looking at that earlier. I just wanted to show you. Michael Landy, YouTube. Michael Landy, if you can see it on the bottom part of the screen, acknowledges that he will probably always be an industrial accident. You should have a look at that. Anyway, you rebuilt the family home in the Devines. Yeah, I guess that was really to do with they asked me to do a commission at the Tate Britain, and they gave you a map
of the Devine galleries, the North, South, and the Octagon, and it's huge. And I kind of thought, God, what am I going to do with this? And then I thought about my dad, I guess, and he had an industrial accident back in, I think it was 1977.
Yeah.
And I started to look into that. It's the one thing that, as I left home, every time I went to visit my parents, I got very angry about the whole plight of my dad. And basically, I collected all these medical records, basically. So I read about our family history and about my dad and all sorts of things. I kind of because this happened when I was a child. Well, and and then so I kind of started to piece things together, and basically, ultimately, in the end, my dad got kind of written off because he was a miner. Basically, he was a miner, and he had an industrial accident up in Northumberland. And I remember reading medical records where he was being basically building. Oh God! It was creating a tunnel, and it caved in on him. And he remembers being buried alive and looking at the roots of the trees above him. And lucky enough, a young man came in and pulled him out. But by that time, he'd suffered severe spinal injuries and was unable to work again. But I remember reading medical records, and there was the nurse comments that my dad's got huge shoulders because he's like these hydraulic spades, and you're literally cutting into the earth. My dad's from Ireland, so it's kind of, but he loved his job, and so they tried. They didn't really. He just basically got written off, and so I decided to try and I thought that was a cause, I guess. And I know it's only an artwork, and it was going to change, and it wasn't going to make him better, but it was a cause, and I felt that I had to do anyway. So I had to obviously articulate that in my artwork, and I recreated our family house. Because the only jobs my dad was left to do was jobs around the house, and as his condition, he starts to disintegrate, then he loses interest in the house. So the whole house, in a sense, becomes his body. And there's a DIY image, because I had my dad whistling, because when sometimes when Dad worked around the house, he would whistle. And so kind of country and western kind of things, Johnny Cash, Jim Reeves, those kind of people. And he had these DIY magazines in the shed. And from dating back from the 60s to the present, to 2004, and so every time a whistle, the note changed, I'd change the image, and so it's kind of lament for work basically, and I began by just drawing my dad because I felt he felt comfortable with that, so I did portraits of him, and then.
But it's
yeah.
I mean, this was much more of a directly emotional project in a sense.
Yeah, no, I still well up a bit when I start to talk about it. I got a bit,
and it was in the video as well. There was the interviews and the films.
Yeah, there was. This is a slow motion camera where basically it records in great detail. It kind of this shelf, which basically has it's like a kind of, he's made a portrait of his life, this shelf. They used to have a piece of fluff underneath the shelf, and when my mum switched on the central heating, it used to dance. The air current would make it dance, and I'd be completely obsessed with this piece of fluff, which I was trying to record it, but I never recorded it properly. But I got very obsessed with a piece of fluff underneath the shelf. But it's literally, that's Dad's portrait as a maker of things. And so he withdraws back into his bedroom, basically, and then it's left up to me to try and do something about that. I try and obviously construct an artwork out of it.
Without wishing to encourage you to well up, as it were, but I remember it was a very significant moment when your family came to see the house in Tate Britain.
Yeah, because it's a very ordinary house, but obviously it's an ordinary house. I made a kind of photographic inventory when we recreate the house. But then once you start to look at the house, then it has weird kind of foibles and weird bits of DIY Dad would do around the house and the exterior of the house, and suddenly that's your house, and it became a sort of tourist. Once it came out, and Daily Telegraph took pictures of, because I didn't really realise that people would want to see the real house, because I thought everyone would just take it for granted that this house in the North Devines and South Devines looked like my house in Essex, our family house in Essex. But then it turned out that the journalists went round there and doorstepped my mum and dad and started taking pictures, and then people would drive up outside the house and take their pictures as well. So,
acts of kindness
Yeah.
Tell us about it. What?
Acts of kindness. Well, this is that's the piece in Sydney. But basically, I guess I started to think about acts of kindness after breakdown. In as far as I don't know. I just obviously after consumer, I kind of talked about it as well. The other things we have to offer as humans is kindness and compassion, and it's not something I could have made years ago. Which is funny if you like to be able to kind of talk about that in a sense, and then also trying to work out my own feelings about kindness, because that's kind of, because obviously it can be a bit slushy, can be a bit sentimental, it can be a bit like we're all a bit more nostalgic back in the 1950s or whatever, and I wanted to look into, because it's an exchange, and I've like from market to lift, like, you know, closing down. So I've always been interested in exchange as well. And it's a kind of fleeting exchange between two strangers. And apart from, obviously, what we have to offer economically in our society, we've also got kindness. And obviously, the best, you know, the tube, in a sense, the underground system is the best way of judging that, because you can see the best and the worst of people on the tube. People can barge into you, can put you into a foul mood, or someone can be kind in a very, you know, everyday kind of way, and it can kind of change your, you're having a bad day, and then suddenly you're having a good day. It's like, so basically, I asked members of the travelling public to send in their everyday acts of kindness, and like, you know, some stories, like there's one woman. She sat, like, I think she's staring at her knees. She's quite depressed. And then she notices that a man opposite her makes a little paper horse, origami horse. And as he gets off the train, he drops it in her lap. And then suddenly she realizes she's not alone. So it's that kind of idea between self and other, and you having that kind of connection. Because quite a lot of the time we pretend we don't have any connection with people on the tube. Like we're all in our own bubbles with our MP3 players or reading newspapers. And I like the idea. But every now and again, you're called upon, or not, to, you know, do something, give up your seat, whatever. And then suddenly you have a dilemma, you know, because suddenly your emotional needs are wrapped up with a complete strangers. And that's not always, doesn't always have the best of endings. It can be some misunderstandings. So your act of kindness can blow up in your face. And suddenly you're having to work that all out in milliseconds, whether you are going to get involved. So I'm kind of interested, I'm interested in, that kind of exchange and how you can construct that into an artwork. And so, I asked members of the travelling public to send in their stories, and then my artwork and their stories end up on the central line on the platforms and some of the interior of some of the trains.
And it's still ongoing.
It's still ongoing. And when I'm really miserable, I look at the website myself just to read a few happy stories to make myself feel a bit better. So it kind of works for me. So I just think it's just how trying to work out my own kindness, because I think when you go onto the tube, you suddenly become very aware that you're very alone, and sometimes you notice people crying on the tube. You notice, and you don't know why they're, you don't know the circumstances, so you don't know whether to say something, to give them a hanky or a few kind words. You don't know, so I don't do anything. But so it's my own sense of trying to work out kindness, basically, and being human.
I just make mention of this, obviously, National Gallery Residency. You are...
I've got a job.
Thank God. Employed at the National Gallery.
Because Scrappy Services, it was an ongoing project.
How is that going? You've got the key to the National Gallery.
When they first phoned up and they asked me to do it, I thought they'd got the wrong person. That's how it started. And then and also I don't paint, so 99.9% of the collection is painting. And it's taken quite a long time for me to find my own way into it.
What are we saying here? These are your...
Well, actually, just like the Bavers. That's Suzanne the Bavers, and So I started making copies. Basically, similar kind of things to what I would have done when I was much younger, and just copying things, And this is from a postcard, actually. Jasper Johns, Suzanne's the Bavers. Jasper Johns also copied it from a postcard, because he was. So you become too embarrassed, even though I'm in the National Gallery of Arts and you become too embarrassed to actually draw that in front of the public, in case I was worried that someone's going to come along and say, "That's not very good, is it?"
Yeah.
That's just so. I basically just hide away in my studio. But
it is quite risky of them as well. I imagine you turning up on the door, dressed in red, prepared to start scrapping the whole collection.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
something.
But I still haven't got the keys at night. They don't trust me.
We were
And I don't
talking-
blame them either.
We were talking a bit about that. Lucian Freud famously would turn up with his Rolls Royce and let himself in.
Yeah,
wouldn't he?
people would. Yeah, people. You could at one point, but it's explained to me the security systems.
You should find the
changed, but-
CCTV footage of that. I
Yeah,
feel.
but so that's so. So I started with copying, and then I kind of thought, well, I didn't quite know where that was going. So, and then I made some bin walls colours. I've got a bin at the summer exhibition at the moment, and I keep telling people vandalising it, but actually people are just putting rubbish in it. But but it feels like they're vandalising it. It's a bronze bin. It was a plastic one, and I sent it over to China. They made it into exactly the same, but a bronze version of the plastic one. I sent them over now, which is a fair exchange. And now I've got it at the summer exhibition.
And you're
People throwing rubbish into it, the bin, which I'm mortified by.
I just wanted to. I'll come to our audience.
Go and chuck some rubbish in the bin. It
Soon.
Makes you feel better.
I wanted to ask a quick question.
Oh, there it is.
There it is. It looks like a very
That was
real
probably
bin.
the plastic. No, that is the plastic version. That's before it went away to China to be made into bronze.
I wanted to talk about a show that I saw that you did once that came in between all of this, and I hope you can see this illustration. But you once did an extraordinary exhibition. I don't know if I can draw you on this, but it just seems.
No, when
that
you mentioned beauty earlier on,
Yeah.
in context of the blue tarpaulins, it's like, it's like that's beauty. I mean, that's really loaded.
I mean, I thought that you seem to be, on the one hand, going. You can do these enormous projects, and then I went to a show where you had drawn weeds.
Yeah, but I think that's detail. I love detail. I can detail in on scale, or I can do detail in something of the minutiae of things, and that's basically literally after breakdown. I decided that's what I would draw: little plants out of. Basically, a weed is a plant out of place. Gardeners think they're a nuisance; they try and get rid of them. As I think they're really stoical, beautiful things that just don't need anything to survive, and bigger plants come in with bigger root systems and kick them out, but they kind of appear in wastelands and cracks in the street, and so they're live plants, and I'm etching them. So they're dying as you're etching them, they're flowering, there's bugs running across the etching plate. You can get really beautiful marks with an etching tool, and it's much better than pen. And so that took me over a year to kind of sew different seasons. It began with Shepherd's Purse. There's Shepherd's Purse, where you see Shepherd's Purse in some of the Renaissance paintings at the National Gallery, and it's called Mother's Heart as well, and it's shaped of the seed pods, and children used to play games with each other where they pull one off, the seed pod would break off into their hands and say, "You've broken your mother's heart." So they have really nice stories behind them as well, and I didn't know anything about plants, and then I tried to grow them, and they all die, the weeds. And so then I worked out they're just much happier on rubbish heaps.
I shouldn't say this, but I know someone who was at the opening who bought one of these. They're stunning works. And
Don't be so surprised.
No, rightly so. Rightly so. And when asked which one, they said, "I want the one that no one wants."
Oh, that's very good. Yeah.
That seemed the best way to do it. Anyway, for now, we could just perhaps, if any of you do have any questions, now would be a good time. A lady with a microphone is on hand, so if anyone would like to fire away with
Apart
something.
from Francois Chantello at the back, he's not allowed to say anything.
Yeah, he's got a
He can
list
just
of
say it.
embarrassing questions, he told us earlier. But should anyone wish to ask, now would be a good time. You don't have to. No? One at the front. Thank you.
I did see Scrappy Services in the 90s, and I did come to your exhibition at home. And I think
Oh, really? Okay.
and the thing about that home one was, for me, that was a changing experience about how I saw art. The actual being invited into a space, looking at the drawings, seeing the crates. You were there on 2 Fridays, and I think you were actually very dedicated to what you were doing. So that was a great experience. So thank you for that experience. But my question is, and it's a bit facetious really, because with Breakdown, which was a defining exhibition, could you do that again now, or was that a particular place you were in your life?
Yeah, I think at the age of 37, I'm 49 now, and I think I was a happy consumer up until that point. You know, I hadn't thought about making a list of everything I owned and destroying it, so it would just be too knowing now, as I kind of, for most of my life up until the age of 37, I hadn't even thought about destroying my worldly belongings, so I just innocently collected all this stuff and then took it apart. So I think it would be, I'd rather kind of be commissioned by a rich person to do it now, so that's what I'd like to do, destroy somebody else's possessions.
Put them on eBay or something.
Yeah,
in the
do
modern
it in a
world.
different way,
Yeah.
yeah.
One other question there.
If I had a magic wand now, what would you like to do?
If you had a magic wand, I'm looking at Gregor, but that would be unfair. Magic wand. Yeah, stop people throwing rubbish in Allen Gardens. I just live off Brick Lane, and people always leaving rubbish, and then my dog's always eating all the rubbish. So I'd like either to leave all the rubbish there the whole time and just like leave it pile up in the park, like so it becomes a huge kind of rubbish mound like we used to have in the 1970s, or make it all disappear.
I would like to ask this one question, because it came in throughout sort of social media, which was, just very briefly, who were your role models and what inspired you to create?
Bill and Ben, the flower pot men. No, who are my role models?
I love the other question, which is, I notice you don't think inside the box. Why?
I don't know what my role models are. I love David Bowie, I suppose. That's
Good enough for
that's
me.
secret between me and you. But no, I don't know. I'm role models. Can't think of any. No, I can't think of any.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Oh, actually, there is the man on Brick Lane, who's Irish man on Brick Lane, who sees it as his duty to clean the whole streets. Obviously, I'm in cleaning mode at the moment. Of Brick Lane, it's like every time I'm walking down the road with my dog, there's this man, he's paid by the council, but he's just like on a mission every day just to clean the street. I mean, he's just at it. He's stoical. He's brilliant. I love him.
That's
Like, I
great.
just turn him around the corner and there he is.
We have to email that back. That lady should now go and meet that man and do a thesis on him, I suspect. Michael, it's been such a great joy and a
Thanks.
privilege. Really, really great.
Thank
Thank you for being here, and thank you all for coming. Thank you, Michael, very much. Great.
Thanks, Gregor.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really good.